You can't imagine that in Europe over 1,000 years ago, there could be a siege battle so full of wisdom and breathtaking. It was precisely after seeing this shocking and thrilling scene that I had the urge to introduce this Vikings series to everyone. In this episode, you will witness a large-scale battle that has gone down in history, the Siege of Paris. I believe after watching, you will definitely be amazed. In that early medieval period when the Vikings dominated, the defensive techniques passed down from ancient Rome were actually as unshakable as towering mountains and rivers, and the Vikings' siege technology was even more remarkable. Before the battle began, first let me introduce the geographical location of Paris at that time and its city defenses. The main city of Paris was situated on an island in the Seine River. Around the river on all sides were impregnable, towering city walls. The city island was connected to the outside land by only one drawbridge. The Parisians guarded the bridgehead, establishing a city tower like a wall of bronze and iron to fend off enemy attacks. This defense couldn't be described as easy to defend and difficult to attack. It could be called an impenetrable fortress, but nothing could stop the Vikings' ambition to raid the city. They gathered 120 warships and over 5,000 brave warriors, preparing to attack the city of Paris in two routes. Because the city gate was too narrow, Logger and Calf led 500 Viking warriors to focus on attacking the front tower. The rest of the people used the siege equipment made by Floki, planning to directly scale the city walls from the north side of the Seine River and enter the city. At the city gate, Logger led the group to come before the gate with ease and a fierce aura. Crossbow bolts from the tower landed at their feet. Outside the safe zone, Logger ordered her men to stop.
Vindication the run!
As the siege engines on the water route got closer and closer to the city walls, Floki, the temporary commander of this battle, blew the war horn. Under the cover of archers, the small squad at the city gate moved the siege engines step by step towards the gate. This was a protective cage built with wood and iron. The battering ram below and the iron plating were separate, so it was a simple split-type siege cart. The Viking warriors, enduring the enemy's crossbow attacks, finally delivered the split-type siege cart to the front of the city gate. As the people outside retreated, many fell to the crossbow bolts during the retreat. Afterwards, Logger ordered a dozen strong men to carry a giant log and continuously ram the city gate, but it was clear that the material of the gate seemed much sturdier than they imagined. Odo also ordered the soldiers to brace the city gate with a large number of wooden wedges. During this time, they even used boulders to fiercely smash the protective cage. On the other side, the siege equipment and longships full of soldiers had already approached the city walls. They placed wooden planks between the ships so the warriors could quickly and safely get close to the walls. With the concerted efforts of the warriors, a large number of wooden siege ladders were transported to the foot of the city walls. This was something the Parisians had never seen before. This device was composed of three parts. The bottom was a wooden raft floating on the water surface. The middle ladder was wide and stable for multiple people to climb. The top consisted of multiple ladders to complete the final ascent to the top of the wall. To prevent the enemy from prematurely destroying it, the ladder needed the rope cut to lean against the wall. Under the cover of archers, batch after batch of Viking warriors climbed the city walls one after another, but it was clear the Parisian soldiers were no pushovers either. From their high position on the city walls, they continuously used crossbows and rocks to smash the Vikings. Seeing wave after wave of warriors climb up only to be knocked down, some Vikings began to feel afraid. Rollo and Bjorn kept directing the soldiers to charge up the walls from below the equipment. Although Ragnar had handed over command to Floki, he was constantly paying attention to how the situation was developing. With a large number of warriors climbing the ladder, some Vikings eventually made it to the walls. Close combat was the natural advantage of the tall and mighty Vikings. They caught the panicked enemy and crazily slaughtered them. At this time, Odo had already arrived on the city walls. Seeing the enemy about to occupy the walls, he disregarded the life and death of the soldiers and himself, insisting on closing the gate of the tower. Seeing the scales of victory had already tipped towards the Vikings, Floki, commanding for the first time, could no longer contain his inner ecstasy. Meanwhile, inside the city of Paris, the people began to pack their things and hide everywhere. King Charles sat trembling in his luxurious palace, worried that the ministers seeing his frightened expression would affect morale. Charles even specially put on a mask. On the other side, Lajertha's progress didn't seem to be going very smoothly. The city gate of Paris was exceptionally sturdy. No matter how they rammed it, they couldn't break it open. Caf ordered his men to bring out 2 huge crossbow bolts, and then he ordered 2 strong men to hammer them in. After unremitting efforts, the arrowheads finally pierced through the city gate. After the arrowheads rotated 90 degrees to get stuck in the gate, Caf ordered the soldiers outside the safe zone to bring over 2 warhorses.
Caf! The ropes!
With the relay of several people regardless of life and death, the rope on the crossbow was finally connected to the ready warhorses. With the warhorses and dozens of strong men exerting force together, the city gate was finally pulled open. But the moment the city gate was pulled open, everyone stood there stunned, because inside the gate, there wasn't a single person, only an empty bridge corridor that made one feel suffocated. Without much thought, the crowd rushed in like a swarm. But halfway through, the battle-hardened Caf finally felt something was off. He told Lagertha to quickly retreat, but how would Lagertha listen to his command? Left with no choice, Caf had to knock Lagertha out with a punch and drag her out. As the drawbridge slowly fell, only then did they discover they were already in a desperate situation. Giant crossbow bolts were shot at the Vikings. In the narrow corridor, they had nowhere to hide. They became sitting ducks for the Parisians, like lambs to be slaughtered. Fortunately, Caf pulled Lagertha out in time, narrowly escaping disaster. And on the front battlefield, even though the Vikings had ascended the narrow and crowded city walls, they couldn't quickly break through the gate on the tower and enter the city. So in the end, it resulted in an overcrowded situation. The large number of Vikings behind couldn't climb the city walls, reaching an impasse. It must be said, the city walls designed by the Parisians were indeed a masterpiece. More crucially, Princess Gisela risked her life to ascend the tower, and she even brought a flag dyed with blood, vowing to advance and retreat together with the warriors. This action undoubtedly brought immense confidence to the soldiers.
Behold the oriflamme! Behold the sacred flag of Saint-Denis! Behold the sacred flag of Francia! Behold, soldiers of Christ! That wherever the oriflamme is, it's a no quarter is to be given to our enemies! Soldiers! Show no mercy! Fight on!
After a speech by Gisela, all the Parisian warriors suddenly seemed divinely assisted. The fear in their hearts vanishing, they began to counterattack with no regard for their lives. The Parisian warriors pushed all the Vikings who had originally climbed the city walls off. This was probably the power of faith. Seeing wave after wave of Viking soldiers shot down, the corpses at the foot of the city walls had already piled into a small hill. Floki began to panic. He seemed to sense that the scales had already tipped to the Parisian side, but what made him even more desperate was yet to come. Odo ordered hot oil to be poured down the ladder from a sling. Countless Viking warriors were scalded by the hot oil. The entire battlefield was instantly filled with wails. A burning arrow was shot at the siege ladder. In an instant, the entire siege equipment was engulfed in raging flames. Floki never imagined that the wooden siege ladders he was so proud of would ultimately become his biggest mistake. At this time, Rollo and Bjorn were still continuously directing the remaining Viking warriors to climb the city walls. But many people had already lost hope. Not wanting to make any more fearless sacrifices, a warrior refused to climb, but Rollo ended his life with an axe. Seeing the city wall remain unbreached after a long attack, the unwilling Rollo chose to climb up himself. After evading all kinds of attacks, Rollo reached the edge of the wall and engaged in a life-and-death struggle with the Parisian army. Bjorn also climbed up on another piece of equipment. Ragnar saw all of this. He rushed up. After all, with defeat imminent, he didn't want his son's life to be lost here too. On the city wall, Rollo fought against 10. Seeing such a valiant man for the first time in her life, Gisela was instantly stunned. The Parisian soldiers couldn't beat Rollo, so they could only cut the ropes of the siege equipment. Just like that, Rollo heavily fell into the Seine River, his life and death unknown. Anxious to save his son, Ragnar rushed up the city wall. On the walls, Bjorn is fighting to kill the enemy, but in the end, 2 fists are not enough. Fortunately, Ragnar rescued Bjorn in time, but Ragnar fell into the enemy's encirclement. In the life-and-death struggle, Ragnar took a glance at the prosperous city of Paris, so close at hand. His eyes were filled with longing and unwillingness. In the end, Ragnar also fell from the city wall, landing in the pile of dead Viking warriors' corpses, accompanied by Ragnar's fall from the wall. This siege of Paris that went down in history ultimately ended with the Vikings' crushing defeat. At this moment, Floki looked at the flames around him and he broke down. Faced with such a rout, he had no face to see the Viking people again. So Floki picked up a dagger, preparing to end himself. In the last moment of his life, a warrior burned beyond recognition let out a heart-wrenching howl. This made the frightened Floki hesitate in the end. After the great battle, upon seeing the mountainous corpses piled in the corridor, King Charles finally understood that the Vikings weren't as terrifying as imagined.
Now that I see them up close, they seem so much less frightening than I suppose. Indeed, they appear almost human.